Hi friends, welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video, we will see what is Kubernetes Service Endpoints. In my previous video, we have discussed about what is Kubernetes Services and what are the different types of Kubernetes services. So it is the continuation of the previous video. If you haven't watched my previous video, please watch that video and then watch this video because it is the continuation part of the previous video. So in the last video, let me summarize what we have discussed. We have discussed there is a, let me reduce the size of this arrow. Yes, so there is a deployment, and deployment in turn it will implement the replica set controller, which in turn maintains the number of pods at the backend, which will serve the microservices. And on top of this, it service is the encapsulation of the deployment. So this is the service, and service which is used for three things, like it will expose to the outside world whatever the microservices which is serving from the pods. So it will help us in exposing to the external world. And second one is maintaining a load balancing between the pods, and third one is service discovery using labels and selectors. So what service will tell, we will filter the pods based on the labels, because each pods will be having its own IP address, and these are ephemeral in nature, and the IP address keep on changing. Hence service in Kubernetes tells we will filter the pods based on the labels mentioned on them, and using the selectors we will select only those pods which are having that specific labels. So this is what we have discussed in our previous video. So now we will see what is service endpoint. So how these IP address of the pods are changing at the backend to serve the microservices which is running inside the pods. And also we will see how these labels and selectors playing a role when there is a deployment, when we have a new deployment, when we are overriding the existing deployment, how these labels and selectors is used. What is the power of labels and selectors when we have a deployment. So these things we will discuss in depth in this video. In order to save time, I have already brought up the cluster. So let me quickly deploy the deployment. This is the GitHub page. So let me copy the deployment and create a file, deployment.yml, shift insert. To implement this, command is kubectl apply -f deployment.yml. So our deployment is deployed. Let me see, kubectl get deploy. So three pods are available now. Let's check the replica set as well. Kubernetes get, short form for replica set is rs. So this is fine. Kubectl get po, or we can give pods. These are up and running. To see the IP address of the pods, so these are, we have to give -o wide, and these are the IP address of the pods. So now we will create service on top of this deployment. So let me deploy node port service. So in the deployment, if you have seen, the label is app nginx. So in the service YAML file also we have to use that as a selector, because this is the label on the pods. So we are using same selector for creating the service. And the port, this 8082 is the arbitrary port for my service, and target port 80 is the container port which is getting exposed. inside the pod, and node port is this is the node port type service. So this is the node port of the node. If you are running on EC2 or anything, so this will be the node port of the EC2 instance. So let me deploy this service as well. Services.yml, shift insert. Let me deploy this service. Command is same, kubectl apply -f services.yml. Service is created. So if you want to check, it is kubectl get svc. So first service, this is the Kubernetes service which is created when we create a Kubernetes cluster, and the type is cluster IP, and this is the cluster IP address, and this is the port 443 is the port, and my service is the service which we have created now, and type is node port mode. This is the cluster IP, and 8082 is the arbitrary port of my service, and 30,007 is the node port of node 2. Okay, so to get the details of which selector it has been used, so we can give -o wide. So it will give the selector details here. So my service is using app nginx as the selector. Okay, fine. Now the important title for this is what is service endpoints and how it is being used here. Service endpoint is nothing but it will serve whatever the if a client hit for a particular website or anything, or if any API call comes from outside, so it will serve from the pods which is running behind the replica site. So the IP address of these pods gets changes, so that's the reason services is introduced in Kubernetes. But these has to be updated. The pods might get damaged or destroyed, so the IP address need to be updated to the service. That is what called service endpoint. To check what are the service endpoints, the command is kubectl get endpoints. So if you see, it is the same name what we have created service, so it is the same name my service, and endpoints are the IP address of the 3 pods. If you want to cross verify, let me run kubectl get pod -o wide. So 10.5.1.423. So these are the IP address. If you check here, kubectl get endpoints, so these all are the IP address of the pods. This is the IP address of one pod, and followed by the container port, then the IP address of the another pod, followed by the container port, and the IP address of the third pod, followed by the container port. Suppose if we delete any of the pod, let me delete one pod from here. So as per the deployment feature auto healing, it has to bring up a new pod. So let's see how these endpoints are getting updated when we delete the pod. Kubectl delete pod followed by the pod name. So pod is deleted. Let's see if new pod has come up. So earlier it was 234, so it is now there is one more new pod 4 seconds ago, and it is 10.5.1.5. so let's see what is the endpoints of the service. If you see the endpoint my service, so you can see the new pod IP is updated in the service endpoint. Okay, fine. If the pods are getting deleted, the endpoints of the services are getting updated automatically. So now what we will do, we will deploy the deployment. So suppose in our real projects and all, we want to deploy, like we want to change the, let me open that deployment YAML file. So this is our deployment YAML file. In real project, suppose this image we want to get updated 1.16.2. if you want to update this, so we have to deploy a new deployment. So let's try to deploy that new deployment, and let's keep the deployment name as Nginx deployment itself. So let's see how it is working in service endpoints and how the deployment is taking place. So for that we can modify in the deployment YAML file, or we can give this command as well. Let me show the command. So this is the command kubectl set image, and we are setting the image for what? For the deployment. It is of version v1.apps followed by the deployment name. The deployment name is nginx-deployment followed by, this is nginx, this is the name of the container. Let me go back to the deployment. So if you see here, line number 19, so this is the name of the hyphen name we have given as nginx. So this is the name of the container. So nginx is equal to, we are giving image name here. So we want to update, older one is 1.14.2. So here we want to update 1.16.1, or we can do the same one while modifying the deployment file, and then kubectl apply -m followed by deployment YAML file. So even that we can do, or we can do in this method. Okay, now image is updated. Let's see what happened to the services. kubectl get endpoints. Is there any changes for the service? So it tells there are new set of pod IPs. Earlier, if you go and check the output, it was 10.5.1.2, 1.3 and 1.5. But now it is telling it has different set of pods, 1.6, 1.7, 1.8, because it has got a new image. So previous pods are deleted. So this is how the endpoints are getting updated with the new image. Let's see pod kubectl get po-oy. So these are just created. So these are the new IPs of the pods. So endpoints are serving from these new pods. The old pods are deleted because that were having images of 1.14.2, and this is 1.16.1. So this is how, when we have a new deployment with the same name and only the image need to be updated, or any of the parameter inside the deployment need to be updated, we can do, and without harming the service will be running as it is. But the deployment with the same name, when we deploy, it will pick up, it will update the service endpoint automatically. Now if we want to deploy new deployment, so let's create new deployment 1.yml, and then let me take the same one here. I'll modify insert. So let me modify, it is 80, so sorry. Okay, let me come out of this and then later I'll modify deployment 1.yml. So let me give the name as nginx deployment 1, and label I'll mention as nginx 1. So same we have to update here as well, nginx 1, and then coming to the pod label we have to update it as nginx 1. So yeah, I'll keep the image same. So here we are just updating the, or we can give the different 16.2. So let's give that, or we'll give 18.1. We'll save this. So here what we did, we have updated the image, and also we have updated the labels on the pods. So now I wanted to show with a new deployment and with a new label. Suppose if there is a deployment of 1.0 and in your real project we are like going for the next version 2.0 and anything, so that time we can just modify the labels. So here we are changing the image from 1.14.2 to 1.18.1. So yeah, so in the real project, if you want to change any of the parameters, and we can call that deployment as 2.0 or any other version, so that time we can change only the labels, and using that labels we can use the service, we can update the service YAML file, and we can still serve that as a service. So I wanted to show that in this second example. So let me deploy this deployment, deploy one YML. Okay, this deployment is created. Let me check kubectl get deploy. Okay, so they are not available still. I believe it is because of the IP, which because of the image name. Hopefully that the name what I have provided is not the valid one. So to check that, kubectl describe deployment, and what is the name of the deployment? It is nginx deployment 1. So let's see. Okay, image, it is this, processing, created. Okay, let's see if this is available now. No. So it is telling unavailable is 3. So none of them is available now. So let me go for the describing the pod. So pod we will be having that details. Get PO. Okay, so here we can see image pullback of error in pulling the image. So let me modify that with the proper deployment image name. I think it should be 16.1, right? So let me modify that 16.1. So this is pulling from Docker Hub public registry. So with this tag it is not available, hence. So let me deploy it again, and this is, there we go. So this is deployed. Let me check now. Perfect. So now it is available 3 bar 3. Okay, so now let's see what happened to the service. Kubectl get svc. So services still exist, and let's see what is the endpoints of this service. -void So it is telling it is serving from these particular pods 1.6, 1.7 and 1.8. But let's see what are the new pods. -o wide. So the new pods are for 1.14, 1.13 and 1.12. But the endpoints are serving for the older pods. So why it is serving for the older pods? Any guesses? Yes, because the service is still using the selectors as app nginx, but it has to use selector as app nginx 1, because if we go to the deployment 1.yml, here we have provided the label as app nginx 1. So but my service is still using selector as app nginx. So let's go to the service yaml file and let's update the selector. So you can understand now the power of labels and selectors in Kubernetes. So whenever we have a new deployment, we can just use a new labels for the deployment, and then we can update that label in the service YAML file. That's it, and we have to deploy it again. So I have done. So let me apply this service. So it is updated. Let me check now the endpoint of the service. So if you see, it is with the new pod names. Now let me check the pod IPs of the new pods. So if you see, these all are new pods, and you can see the deployment name nginx deployment 1. So these all are coming from the new pods. So our service is serving with the new pods. So this is how in our real project we can use deployment and services, and we have to modify the labels, and using that labels, using a selector in service, we can update with the new deployment. And whenever we want to go back to the older one, we can just modify the selector in the service YAML file and the labels mentioned in the deployment, so it will roll back to the previous one. So to check the status, the command is kubectl rollout status deployment followed by the deployment name. So our deployment name is nginx deployment 1. So it tells successfully rolled out. If it was like in progress or anything, it would have told okay, one of the replica is done, two are pending, so like that. So now the rollout is successful. So this is the command to check the rollout of the deployment. And next, if you want to edit anything in the deployment, this is the command kubectl edit deployment followed by the deployment name. So here it is deployment 1, and earlier I have showed command of kubectl set image to edit the image. Similarly, so here we can edit anything, not only image, we can edit whatever we want, or we can directly go to the deployment YAML file and there also we can edit. So here if you want to edit the labels or image update or anything, so we can do with this command. What is that command? It is kubectl edit. Let me come out of this. So command is kubectl edit deployment slash followed by the deployment name. And next command is to check what are the to check the services details and all. It is kubectl describe service followed by service name. So here also we can see the endpoints. So endpoints, it is having 3 pod IPs followed by the container ID, and this is a node port, and this is the arbitrary port of the service, my service, and this is the cluster IP address of the node port service, and the type is node port. So what is the command? kubectl describe services slash, that my service is the name of the service. Similarly, if you want to check any rollout history of the deployment, so these commands are very useful in our real project, hence I am just stressing over here. So kubectl rollout history. Earlier we have given kubectl rollout status followed by the deployment and deployment name to check the history, like what all deployment has been done. So in that case, we can give this command, and our deployment name was nginx deployment 1. So there are two changes happened. There is two versions, version number 1 and version number 2. So if you want to go to any specific version, so we can go by using the command, same command, but we have to give hyphen hyphen version is equal to 2. So here I want to see what is the revision 2. So in the revision 2, what we have did, we have modified the label, and I think we have modified the image. So we have modified the image here. So let's see what is the revision 1. So in the revision 1, the image was 1.14.2, and in the revision 2, the image is 1.16.1, and remaining all are fine. So this will give the details of the deployments with respect to their revisions. So this is the command kubectl rollout history deployment followed by the deployment name hyphen hyphen revision and the number. So to check that, we have to give kubectl rollout history without any versions. We have to just give only the history. It will give how many versions. If I make any other changes, so there will be one more row added, 3 revision, sorry, it should be 3 revision, like that. And if you want to check the revision 3's details, you have to give this command, same command followed by hyphen hyphen revision is equal to 3. And suppose if you want to undo anything, like the current image is revision 2 is 1.16.1, and I wanted to roll back, so I can give this command kubectl roll out undo. I want to undo, and what I want to undo, which deployment name I can provide here. So this will go to the previous one. So currently I am having 2 revisions. If you see here, 2 revisions, so I wanted to undo it. So if I undo it, it will go to revision 1. So revision 1, the image is 1.14.2. so here I have 2, but if we have 4 5 revisions, right, so that time you can give the revision number where we want to go to, where once we do undo, right, where we want to go, in which revision we want to go. So I can specify revision 1, run the command. Okay, it is giving some error. What happened? Okay, sorry, I got it. Actually the command is kubectl rollout undo deployment followed by the deployment name. So our deployment name is deployment 1, and the parameter is hyphen hyphen 2 hyphen revision and followed by the revision name. So it will roll back to my revision 1. So it's get rolled back to the previous version. I'll mention all this command in my GitHub page so that it will be easier for you people in deploying in the real projects. So if you have any doubts, please comment on this video and let me know at what timestamp or something you have any queries. So I will come back and I will try to answer those queries. Thanks for watching, friends.